Denny Hamlin was seeing red in overtime at Phoenix. After 2 seasons of Ross Chastain crashing him, apologizing, but repeatedly doing it again, the 3-time Daytona 500 champion had grown tired of it. With his hopes for a good result in the desert quickly fading, he figured now was as good a time as ever, reacted, and took his trackhouse nemesis with him. On his Actions Detrimental podcast, Hamlin offered a detailed version of events on those final laps.
My crew chief told me there was 18 cars on the lead lap. And at that point, I said, all right, well, I'm probably live looking at a picture. I'm probably running 6th or 7th. I'm about to get passed by everybody behind me who's on fresh tires. I'm about to finish in the mid-teens. And I said, you're coming with me, buddy.
Really?
I did.
Wow, that's not what I thought.
It wasn't a mistake. No, it wasn't a mistake.
Okay.
I unleashed, I let the wheel go, and I said, he's coming with me. And so, it's been interesting because I hear people say, well, this for last year, this for this, for that. It's not, I got wrecked at the Clash. I don't know that Ross sees it that way. I think he's still curious about what I thought about the Clash. I don't know why he would wonder what I thought about the Clash.
Those comments raised the eyebrows of fans and unsurprisingly caught the attention of the NASCAR brass. And several days later, NASCAR responded, issuing a penalty that included a $50,000 fine and a loss of 25 driver points because of his admission that it was intentional. Within hours of the announcement, NASCAR Senior Vice President of Competition Elton Sawyer visited with the media about the incident and explained the sanctioning body's decision.
I think the way we look at these situations, Jim, is they're all individual, right? They're unique to themselves. And when you look at this one this past weekend, we would have viewed that as a racing incident. But then as 24 hours later, have a competitor that has gone on a podcast, which I will say we're delighted that Denny has a podcast. We think that's great, interacts with the fans. But when you start admitting that you have intentionally done something that would compromise the results of the end of the race, then that rises to a level that we're going to get involved. There's no other way to look at that. We're going to get involved in those situations. We've been consistent in the past with that, and we will be consistent going forward.
Consistent in the past? Are we talking about the not-so-distant past, like just last season, when Joey Logano got out of his car after winning at Darlington in the spring and publicly admitted what he had done to William Byron in the closing laps was intentional retaliation for something that had happened laps before and the very reason he won the race? The Team Penske driver was definitive in his comments. There was no room for misinterpretation when Regan Smith asked him about the late contact with the number 24.
Race here, talk me through turn 3. You chase down William Byron. We see some contact, but you end up coming through with the win today.
Yeah, you're not going to put me in the wall and not get anything back. That's how that works. But
NASCAR and its competitors have seemingly agreed for years that there is a preference for a code with the driver self-policing rather than the sanctioning body getting in the middle of on-track disputes. NASCAR didn't penalize Logano after his win at Darlington, confirming that it viewed the situation as a racing incident and ignored his post-race admission. Many viewed the latest dust-up between Hamlin and Chastain as such an incident. Sawyer was asked why the Hamlin situation warranted a penalty compared to other similar self-policing scenarios.
Hasn't warranted a penalty.
Totally different from this aspect, Jordan. The fact that, and we encourage that. We want them to show their personalities. We want them to settle this. We don't want to be in the middle of it. But this one has gone on for a little while. It went on last year. Felt like maybe we were in a good spot. Looks like it was rearing its head again. And then the comments that were made afterwards put us in a position that we had no choice but to react. And again, that has been consistent. If you look at prior cases, even last year, of how we reacted to this.
Sawyer mentions NASCAR got involved because the conflict had carried over into a second year and how Hamlin's comments forced NASCAR's hand. Incredibly, Sawyer and NASCAR completely ignored what Hamlin said later in his podcast.
I just, I wanted to get back to racing, honestly, with him. And I think that that's a lot of the conversation that we had
I was
afterwards.
gonna say, what was the conversation after race? Because it was
the
it
conversation
was a long conversation.
He came up to me and he says, I guess I deserved it. And I said, yeah, I think so. We talked and I think that we are in a better place where I think we're willing to put the past behind us. And I think that we're going to judge each other from this point forward. And I think that's the fairest way to do it. As far as this season is concerned, we need to just race each other with better respect from this point forward. And that's what I hope to get out of this. And, he asked for a truce, I asked for a truce, and let's just see how it goes from here.
Moments later in the call with reporters, Claire B. Lang, who is viewed as one of the best in the business and not afraid to ask the tough questions, did just that when she mentioned the truce agreed to by both drivers and asked if those comments were considered by NASCAR officials in the decision-making process for the penalty. The NASCAR official completely dodged the question.
On this.
Yeah, the comments, I think if you look at it from a 30,000 foot view and you look at our athletes at the highest level of motorsports in North America and sending the message that it's okay to tell somebody that I'm going to wreck you and then do that, that's not the message that we need to be sending to anybody. For sure, we don't need to be sending that to young drivers that are starting out in lower levels and inspire to be at the NASCAR Cup level, in some period of time. That's not the message that, we need to be sending.
Sawyer and, more importantly, NASCAR never answered the question. Instead, they tried to suggest Hamlin had threatened Chastain before the race that he was going to get him, which never happened. And then based on Sawyer's response or lack thereof, NASCAR either never listened to the truce comments or completely ignored them, which makes no sense. You would think officials would take the totality of Hamlin's remarks, including what he and Chastain said after the race. As much as Sawyer and NASCAR want to claim that Hamlin forced them to react, it's actually just the opposite. Hamlin gave NASCAR an out. With the truce comments, officials could have said, "We heard the podcast, both drivers agreed to race more respectfully going forward, and we will certainly keep our eye on the situation going forward." That would have been a good example of the drivers self-policing and NASCAR staying out of it. Instead, sanctioning body officials couldn't help themselves, jumped right in the middle of it for no good reason, and then clumsily tried to explain their case. And NASCAR wonders why fans have difficulty trusting its judgment and what their officials regularly have to say.